Ever wondered what goes on in the mind of a serial killer? Is it a killer or a demon incarnate? Today, we're diving into the dark tale of the artist, a murderer whose brutal crimes and disturbing methods shook up a whole city. It's a cat and mouse game between him and Detective Moraes, a clash unveiling a journey to the heart of evil, where art and death intertwine in eerie ways. Get ready for a story that challenges our understanding of justice and sanity, uncovering shocking secrets and a disturbing human nature. YouTube's not too fond of this stuff, so smash that like button to boost this video. I'm counting on your support. We'll be doing horror stories, serial killer tales, UFOs, and sci-fi. So, let's begin. The night was dense and silent, only broken by the muffled sounds of the police station. In an austere interrogation room, lit by cold, impersonal light, sat a handcuffed man with a distant and calculating gaze. Known as the artist, he had been captured following a series of brutal murders that terrorized the city over the past year. Across the table sat Detective Moraes, a veteran in the police force, his tired eyes hiding a sharp and observant mind. He was aware that this interrogation would be unlike any other. 10 victims, all killed with brutality that defied reason, and now the person responsible for these atrocities was there, right in front of him. Moraes began the interrogation with basic questions, setting a slow, almost hypnotic pace. He watched every gesture, every change in the killer's tone of voice, searching for any clue that might reveal more about the motives behind the heinous crimes. When the artist began to speak, a subtle shift occurred in his posture. He leaned forward, an almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "You never understand, do you?" he said. His voice, previously cold and distant, now carried a disturbing warmth. "It's not just about killing. It's about the sensation. The art." The detective felt a chill run down his spine. The artist's words were carefully chosen, each sentence a sharp blow, meant to shock and destabilize. Moraes knew he was about to enter the mind of a monster, but it was his duty to seek the truth, no matter how dark it might be. "Explain yourself," Moraes said, keeping his voice steady. The killer described the sensation of killing, talking about the blood on his hands as if it were paint, each victim a canvas. His preference for knives was an artistic choice. He saw firearms as unworthy, lacking the intimacy and creativity he sought. Moraes realized he was facing a disturbed mind, yet incredibly lucid in its madness. Every word, every pause, was calculated to provoke and disturb. And so, the cat and mouse game began, a duel of minds between the detective and the serial killer, in an interrogation that would prove to be one of the most challenging and revealing of Moraes' career. With each passing moment, he felt an increasing oppression, as if an invisible darkness was closing in around him, emanating from the artist himself, touching his soul in a way he knew would never be completely erased. As the interrogation deepened, Detective Moraes prepared to dive into the darkest corners of the artist's mind. "Tell me about the sensation of killing," he asked, his voice firm despite the tension mounting in the air. The artist tilted his head, as if pondering the question. Then, with an almost nostalgic sigh, he began to describe. "It's like a wave that envelops me," he began, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "The moment the blade penetrates the skin, it's as if I connect with something primal. There's a purity in it, a truth that can only be found in the warm blood flowing from the wounds I create." Moraes felt a knot form in his stomach. The artist's descriptions were vivid and disturbing, painting a grotesque picture of pleasure and destruction. The killer continued, describing the thrill of seeing blood on his hands, as if each drop were a trophy, a proof of his power over life and death. "The blood," he whispered, "is the essence of life. To feel it running between my fingers is like being bathed in pure vitality." There was an intensity in the artist's eyes as he spoke, a flame burning with a sick passion. He described the physical closeness with his victims during the act, talking about the scent of fear and pain, about the resistance of the human body against the invasion of the blade. "It's a dance," he said, "an intimate and final dance. Each victim reacts differently, and each one teaches me something new. It's an exploration, a journey through human fragility." Moraes listened, horrified, but unable to interrupt. The artist's words were like poison, seeping into his mind, leaving him with a sense of filth and desecration. He knew he was hearing the confessions of a monster, someone who saw the act of taking a life not as a crime, but as a form of macabre and distorted art. The artist concluded his confession with a cold smile. Killing is the purest expression of power. Its creation and destruction intertwined in a single sublime act. Moraes knew that, despite all his years in the field, nothing had prepared him for the depth of human depravity he was now witnessing. He wondered how someone could lose themselves so much in darkness to find pleasure in the pain and terror of others. And as the artist leaned back in his chair, satisfied with his narrative, Moraes felt he was facing not just a murderer, but the very embodiment of evil. After revealing the emotional aspects of his crimes, the artist went on to explain the choice of his tool of death. Detective Moraes, maintaining his composure, asked, "Why knives? Why not a firearm, something more distant?" The killer looked at Moraes with a mix of contempt and amusement. "Firearms," he began, "are impersonal, distant. They separate you from the act. Shooting someone is like pressing a button, it's mechanically cold, devoid of any true connection." He paused, as if savoring each word before continuing. "But a knife. Ah, a knife is different. With a knife, you feel everything. There's direct contact, a physical exchange between the killer and the victim. You feel the resistance of the skin, the rupture of the tissue, the warm moisture of the blood." The artist's smile widened, revealing an almost childish excitement. "Each cut is an intimate experience, a communion between me and my victim. It's a deadly dance that can only be appreciated through touch, through closeness." Moraes felt a shiver run down his spine. The artist's words revealed a macabre obsession with physical contact, a need to feel the terror and pain of his victims up close. It was a preference that spoke of a deep desire to dominate and control, to be the undisputed master of another person's fate. "With a knife, I control everything," the artist continued, his voice almost a whisper. "I decide where to cut, how deep to go. Each victim is a blank canvas, and I am the artist shaping their end. The knife is my brush, my instrument of creation and destruction." The detective realized the duality in the artist's choice, the knife as a symbol of power and control, but also of intimacy and connection. It was a sick vision, a grotesque distortion of reality that only a deeply disturbed mind could conceive. "There's nothing more satisfying than feeling life draining under the pressure of my hand," the artist concluded, a crazy glint in his eyes. "The knife allows me to savor each moment, every gasp, every desperate heartbeat." Moraes knew he was facing a dark truth for the artist. Killing was not just an act of violence, but a sacred ritual, an experience that transcended mere physical execution. And this revelation only served to make the monster sitting in front of him even more terrifying. After describing his choice of weapon and the sensation of killing, the artist began to talk about his victims. Detective Moraes, despite his growing revulsion, knew that these confessions were crucial to understanding the mind of the killer. "The first victim was a test," the artist began, his voice calm and controlled. "I needed to understand the process, feel what it would be like. I chose someone at random, unconnected to me. It was disorganized, even clumsy. But it taught me a lot." He described the scene with a chilling coldness, talking about how he had followed the victim, choosing the right moment to strike, away from prying eyes. The description was technical, almost clinical, but there was a gleam in his eyes that revealed his true excitement. "The second was more planned. I wanted to see if I could recreate the sensation, but with more control." The artist spoke of his victim with an almost artistic appreciation, detailing how he had prepared the crime scene, carefully choosing the location and method. "But it was Mariana, the third, who really defined me," he said, a sad smile appearing on his face. "She was different. Beautiful, vibrant, full of life. I watched her for weeks, learning her routine, her passions. Mariana became an obsession for me." Moraes felt a wave of anger and sadness hearing the name of the victim. He remembered the case, the young woman found in her own home, the scene, a grotesque spectacle of violence and obsession. The artist described the murder of Mariana with disturbing detail. "I wanted her to know she was special. That's why everything was meticulously planned. The way I entered her home, how I surprised her at her most vulnerable moment. I let her understand what was happening, let her see the truth in my eyes before I finished." "Finish what?" Moraes asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Our last dance," the artist replied, with a disturbing calmness. "I danced with her, the knife as our conductor. Each cut was a step, each scream a musical note. It was the most beautiful of my symphonies." Moraes felt a knot in his throat. The description was of unimaginable cruelty, an act of pure evil disguised as art. The detective realized that each murder was a piece of a macabre puzzle in the artist's mind, a journey of self-discovery through suffering and death. "I knew, after Mariana, that this was what I was born to do," the artist concluded, a satisfied smile on his lips. "Every victim since then has been a tribute to her, an attempt to recreate that perfection." Moraes now understood the disturbing pattern behind the crimes. The artist didn't just kill, he created narratives, twisted stories where he and his victims were the main characters in a deadly drama. As the interrogation progressed, the tension between Detective Moraes and the artist became increasingly palpable. Moraes, armed with the killer's disturbing confessions, was determined to break through the artist's sick facade, while the latter seemed to relish the opportunity to disturb and manipulate the detective with his graphic descriptions. "You killed 10 people, 10 lives taken without reason," Moraes said, his voice laden with accusation and disdain. "You see art in this, but what you've done is nothing but slaughter, pure evil." However, the artist remained unfazed. He tilted his head to the side, a wicked smile forming on his face. "Ah, detective, you still don't understand," he said, his voice calm and controlled. "I didn't just kill those people. I freed them. Freed them from their mediocre lives, transformed their deaths into something beautiful, something memorable." Moraes felt a wave of anger and revulsion. "There's no beauty in what you've done. You're a monster, a predator. And I will make sure you pay for every life you've taken." It was then that the artist changed his posture, his expression becoming darker, more threatening. "You think you can judge me? You, who live in an illusion of morality and justice?" His voice took on a deeper, almost demonic tone. "I killed them all. And you, Detective Moraes, you will be next." The air in the interrogation room became heavy, charged with a palpable threat. Moraes realized that the artist wasn't just boasting or trying to intimidate him. There was a deep conviction in his words, a distorted belief that his actions were justified, even necessary. The detective leaned forward, fixing his gaze on the killer. "You're in custody. Your threats are empty here. But I will do everything to understand how a person can get so lost in darkness. To ensure that you never have the chance to hurt anyone again." The verbal confrontation intensified, with the artist trying to destabilize Moraes, using his words as sharp weapons, while Moraes, though shaken by the threats, remained steadfast, searching for some light in the darkness, some sign that could help him understand the true nature of the monster in front of him. The confrontation between Detective Moraes and the artist reached its apex. As Moraes tried to maintain control, a folder with details of the cases was brought to him. Leafing through the files, his look was one of searching for answers, until a photo made him freeze. It was the photo of one of the victims, a young woman with a gentle smile and expressive eyes. Moraes felt his heart stop for a moment. He knew that face, not as a detective, but as an uncle. It was his niece, Laura, with whom he had lost contact years ago. The discovery struck Moraes like a physical blow, taking his breath away. The artist watched, and seeing the detective's reaction, a wicked smile formed on his lips. "Ah, so you finally saw," he said with a tone of satisfaction. "Yes, I knew about your dear Laura. A beautiful girl, full of dreams and hopes. A pity she didn't understand the art in her death." Moraes felt a mix of pain, anger, and disbelief. You knew about Laura? How? Why?" The detective's voice trembled, his usual composure threatened by the revelation. The artist tilted his head, looking at Moraes with an almost understanding gaze. "Ah, detective, I do my homework. I knew of your connection to her, just as I knew of all the connections of my victims. It's part of my process to understand who they are, who will suffer with their loss. And in your case, I wanted it to be personal. I wanted you to feel the pain I feel when creating my art." The interrogation room became a whirlwind of emotions. Moraes, shaken by the discovery, struggled to maintain rationality. Laura's death, now so personal, cast new light on the case. The detective realized that each of the artist's murders carried a message, a hidden meaning intended to torment not just the victims, but all those who loved them. "You're a monster," Moraes whispered, his voice laden with grief and fury. "You used the death of innocence as a tool for your madness, to spread your pain." The artist just smiled, his expression serene amidst the emotional chaos he had unleashed. "We're all monsters in our own way, detective. I just embraced mine." The revelation of Moraes' personal connection to one of the victims not only intensified the tension in the room, but also led the detective to a deeper and more terrifying understanding of the crimes. He now saw each murder under a new light, each one a piece in a macabre game that the artist had created to torture the souls of the survivors. The artist is sentenced to death, facing his execution not as an end, but as the culmination of his macabre work. He sees the death sentence as a transformation, a step towards immortality in his distorted view of art. In his final interactions with Detective Moraes, the artist reveals his satisfaction with the legacy of terror he will leave behind, believing that each murder contributes to his eternal symphony. Even in the face of death, he maintains an air of serenity, considering his imminent end as a final spectacle, an act that will solidify his mark in history. The artist's execution is a somber moment, symbolizing the deep evil that can reside in the human heart. For Moraes and all affected by the artist's crimes, the execution brings no relief, only a constant reminder of human capacity for cruelty. The story ends with the artist's death, leaving a trail of questions and a persistent feeling of unease. The story reflects on the nature of evil in art, and the killer's execution serves as a point of reflection on the indelible scars left by his horrendous acts. And that, folks, is the chilling conclusion of our dive into the artist's dark world. If this story intrigued you, let us know in the comments what you'd like to hear next on the channel. But don't go just yet, we've got more in store for you. Stick around because we have 2 more serial killer stories lined up that are sure to keep you on the edge of your seat. Just click to continue the suspense. Remember, each story brings us closer to understanding the depths of human mystery. So, comment, like, and subscribe for more thrilling tales right here. Stay tuned and let's unravel these mysteries together.